I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Hello, people of the earth and internet. I'm 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐜. This is so important. We're talking today about the greatest Christmas film ever made, White Christmas. I love White Christmas. I've seen it so many times. I'm about to go see it. Yes, hello, Lizzie. I'm about to go see it in theaters for the 70th anniversary. I'm ready. I'm so fucking ready. I have no notes for this video. We're going off of what I feel in my heart, which is a lot. Lizzie's just a part of the video now. White Christmas came out in 1954, a movie filmed in VistaVision for the first time, starring Bing Crosby, Danny Kaye, Rosemary Clooney, and Vera Ellen, directed by Michael Curtis, acclaimed director of Casablanca, and featuring music by Irving Berlin. I'm here to walk you through today what happens in this fucking masterpiece of a movie, okay? It's mostly not a problematic movie, but it did come out in 1954. So take what I just said with a grain of salt. The obvious problem with the film is there's no non-white people in it. Everybody in that movie is as white as the snow that they're singing about falling. There is a black guy for about 0.5 seconds in a scene where they're in a train club car and they order sandwiches and lemonade and stuff, and he nods. That's it. Doesn't verbally say a damn thing. There is also a number in the movie called the minstrel number. We'll get to that. Unlike many movies back then, including the atrocity of a film Holiday Inn that people often lump White Christmas in with, there's no blackface. Now, I know that means the bar is in hell. I'm not going to be like, oh my god, yay, they didn't do blackface in the movie. But, you know, if you're ever like, ooh, should I do Holiday Inn or White Christmas? Keep in mind, one, Holiday Inn sucks. It's a terrible movie, terrible plot, terrible songs besides White Christmas. And two, has blackface. And White Christmas doesn't have any of those things. Anyway, we open up in World War II. I know, so fun. And it's clearly all done on a soundstage with very shabby painted backdrops, but that's okay. They had to crank these films out back then. Studios were putting out 30 films a year. Honestly, let's get back to it, okay? Stop with the fucking remakes. I can't. Anyway, the men are putting on a little Christmas Eve show featuring Bob Wallace and Phil Davis. Bob Wallace, played by Bing Crosby, is this universe's version of Bing Crosby. He's playing himself. Bob Wallace, in the world of White Christmas, is canonically a very famous singer. Phil Davis is not. He's a regular guy. He's a private. Bob Wallace is a captain. Can you imagine if that happened nowadays? Like, I know back in the day, like, singers went to war and stuff, like Elvis. I don't know if Elvis, like, saw combat, but he did enlist. But can you imagine if, like, Harry Styles became, like, a captain in the army? That'd be insane. Anyway, they're doing a little shindig. They're putting on this show. Then we see this Jeep come up. There's 3 men in it. One of them is General Waverly. General Waverly is walking with a cane because he has been injured in combat, and we find out that he is being honorably discharged from service. The general who's replacing him is also in the Jeep. He's a dick. He's like, why are the men celebrating? I don't give a singular fuck if it's Christmas. General Waverly and his assistant Joe are like, yeah, there's no Christmas in the army, General. You're right. Men get a little loose during the change of command. And he's like, I'll have them turned out on the double. And so General Waverly's like, cool, I'll go tell him to fuck off. Take the long way back to headquarters. The other guy in the Jeep who's just driving has nary a verbal line, drives off in an ambiguous direction on this soundstage. Joe says to Waverly, that's not the way back to headquarters. He says, Joe, you know that, and I know that, but the general doesn't know that. At least he won't for about an hour and a half. Joe and General Waverly go in, they sit in the back, they watch. Bing Crosby, as Bob Wallace, starts singing White Christmas. The backing track is a hand-cranked music box that Phil Davis is cranking. All the soldiers are starting to look sad because it's like the fun of the evening is wearing off. It's really setting in that like they're in the midst of a horrible war. They're not home for Christmas. Then when that's over, Bob Wallace talks and he's like, you know, it's too bad General Waverly couldn't be here for this. We owe a lot to General Waverly. He has a line I really like where he says, it's too bad the General couldn't be here for our little Yuletide clam bang because we really had a slam bang finish cooked up for him. And I think we need to start speaking like that again. But then basically General Waverly, because men can't process emotions, can't stand everyone getting like sentimental about him. So he jumps up and he's like, attention, and all the men jump to attention. And General Waverly marches up and he's like, Captain Wallace, who's responsible for having a party in this area? And it was Bob Wallace's idea, but Phil Davis, who will spend the rest of the movie simping for Bob Wallace, steps up and he's like,
it was me, sir. Me, sir.
I believe they did want Fred Astaire to play this part, and Fred Astaire said no, and thank God, because then Phil Davis wouldn't have been gay as fuck. But he's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm Private Phil Davis, sir, and this is Bob Wallace, and it's Christmas Eve, and you would have to pay so much fucking money to see Bob Wallace perform. And he's like, okay, whatever. And he doesn't know how to process or like express his emotions, because again, a man, it's the 40s. Be serious about it. He looks at Bob and he goes, don't just stand there, how do I get off? And they say, we happen to have a slam bang finish cooked up for you. And then they begin to sing the first official song of the movie, which is We'll Follow the Old Man. We'll follow the old man wherever he wants to stay, long as he stays away from the battle's fray. Because we love him, especially when he keeps us on the ball. And we'll tell the kiddies we answer duty's call, with the grandest son of a soldier of them all. Marching out, Waverly is shaking hands. It's beautiful, it's heartfelt. When you know it, the Germans start dropping bombs. So what do the men do? They duck down, because clearly ducking down will protect you from Nazis bombing you. That's just science. When they think the planes have passed, they begin to slowly whisper sing the music again. They whisper the song so the Nazis can't hear them. And then they rise up and it gets such a big deal and it's so exciting. And then General Waverly and Joe get out in another Jeep and they sail off, and we're left with the rest of the soldiers. And the Germans come back and they start bombing everything again. And everyone's running for cover. And because Bob Wallace is the captain, he's telling all the privates what they need to do. He's trying to get everybody out of there safe. A wall, a giant wall that is there on the soundstage in which they're filming, it's gonna fall. And Phil Davis is trying to get Bob Wallace out of the way. But Bob is so preoccupied with trying to get all the privates to safety. The wall is about to fall and crush him and kill him. So Phil grabs him and drags him to cover, and some of the wall crashes down and really injures Phil's arm. And thus begins a whirlwind romance between these two. Bob goes to see Phil in the infirmary, thank him for saving his life, and basically Phil uses the injury he got to his arm by saving Bob's life to guilt trip Bob into agreeing to sing a duet with him when they get back to the States after the war is over. We cut to a bunch of newspaper headlines about yay, the war's over, and then we get a really gay montage of the two of them becoming world-class superstars, singing these little gay songs. It's so gay, oh my god. And you're also getting montages in this gay montage of Bob will try to be convinced to do something bigger for their career that would probably take more time and money and stress, and says no, he doesn't want to do it. And then Phil argues that he should do it, and then Phil points to his arm that was injured back in the war and makes a sad face, and Bob goes along with it. And that's their dynamic, is they're like besties. It's a will they, won't they. They probably have fucked, like let's be really real about it. They now have a show called Wallace and Davis. It's a variety show. It's a hit. It's traveling the country. They're currently at a stop in Florida. Phil tries to convince Bob to go out with Rita and this girl Doris, who's like a dope. She has the iconic line when Phil introduces Bob to Doris.
What do you do?
Mutual, I'm sure.
Which also is insane that he has to be introduced to her. She's in your show. You don't know all the people in your show? Phil then tries to really sell it that he's a heterosexual and wants Bob to come out for drinks with him, Rita, and Doris. And the idea is that Rita, who's not an idiot, is for homosexual Phil, and Doris, who is an idiot, and Bob is apparently never seen before, even though she's in his show, is for Bob. Bob is like, no, we can't, because we have to go look at an act. He walks away to the dressing room. Rita is like, oh my god, fuck him. Doris is like, for real. And I'm like, that is your boss. I don't understand. Regardless. Phil goes in there and we got an incredible scene. We got an amazing scene. One of my favorite scenes in cinema. My favorite scene of the movie to quote. Basically, Phil is telling Bob that like all they do is work, work, work. And he basically wants Bob to like meet a girl and, you know, let Phil have some time off, which is ridiculous because Phil is the one who pushed them to be this successful. But it's kind of like careful what you wish for, because Phil's like, oh my god, now we work 24/7. I wanted to be famous, but can we have a moment to breathe? And it's like he could in fact not do it with a broken heart, and he wouldn't ask an hour in the asylum where they raised her. We have this great back and forth. It's hilarious. It's so funny. And then Bob's like, well, what do you want? And Phil says, I want you to get married. I want you to have 9 children. And if you only spend 5 minutes a day with each kid, that's 45 minutes. And I'd at least have enough time to go out and get a massage or something. They're doing like this very well choreographed changing out of their costumes into their regular clothes while always standing behind some kind of prop or piece of furniture so that we, the audience, don't actually see it. Because it's 1954, so like God forbid we see a man in his undershirt and boxers. Then he's like, what act are we going to see? And Bob says, it's a sister act. Phil says, we don't need a fucking sister act. What are we doing this for? This is stupid. We could go be getting drunk off our ass at a gay club. Bob says, well, I got a letter from Benny Hayes, this guy we were in the army with, and it's his sister. They then start making jokes that like Benny Hayes is really ugly. And they're like, how can he have sisters? He's so ugly. And he's like, tell me why we're doing this. Why should we waste our last night in Florida? And Bob says, let's just say we're doing it for an old pal in the army. Phil says, it's not good, but it's a reason. And that will become like a reoccurring thing. Because a big part of this movie is the way that veterans treat one another in a society, in a culture, in a country that undervalues and mistreats veterans. It's a big theme of this movie, and it is one of the reasons I really love it and think it is very timely. They go to see the sister act. We get to meet the sisters in question, the icons, the divas, the stars, Betty Haynes and her younger sister, Judy Haynes. Their manager or the guy who like runs the club or whatever comes to their dressing room door and he's like, oh my God, Wallace and Davis are out there to catch your show. They got a letter from your brother. And Betty's immediately like, that's sus. That's suspicious. That's weird. She's like, how do you get a letter from our brother? And Judy's like really overselling it, making it so fucking clear that she had something to do with this. And Judy's like, oh my God, that's so nice of Benny. Wow. And then Betty's like, did you get Mom's letter? Benny's in Alaska. He's been out of the country for the last 3 months because that's how old the movie is. Judy really tries to cover her ass and she's like, oh, he could have written from Alaska. And Betty's like, well, he didn't, did he? And then she's like, Judy, why did you write the letter? And Judy's a mover, a maker, a shaker. She's like, we need to like get up in life. We keep just playing at clubs in Florida like we're trying to be big names here, so I use this in. And Betty really wants to make it on her own marriage. She doesn't want connection. She's the epitome of against Nepo babyism. She's not willing to do what Phil did to guilt somebody into it. I can respect Betty's vibes. Couldn't be me. I would be scheming and everything to get to the top the way Phil and Judy do. But whatever, I guess like Betty has self-respect. We have Phil and Bob and they watch and the song begins and they come out and sing Sisters and it's so good. So then the sisters, the Haynes sisters, come out to have a drink with the men after their show. And basically Judy's still trying to push and be like, how do we get better? How do we get famous? How do we get big? Betty is like, ew, oh my God, Judy, shut up. You're so thirsty. Phil is just hoping that Betty and Bob are going to want to fuck. Bob's just there for the vibes. Phil convinces Judy to go dance with him so we can leave those two alone to like, maybe let the sparks fly. No, the sparks aren't flying. Love at first sight. But Betty is in denial. And she's like, hey, you were brought here tonight under false pretenses. Bob thinks that's hilarious. He's like, look at that, little Judy working an angle. Betty thinks that's offensive. She gets pissed. And they begin to argue, but then they keep moving their seats closer and closer together. And it's like, oh my God, the romance. Anyway, we cut back to completely, totally heterosexual Phil and Judy, and they start dancing. And the invisible chorus kicks in and sings The Best Things Happen While You're Dancing. We get an incredible scene. It's so cute. It's very gay. Like, there's no way Phil is selling this. I know I'm going to keep saying that throughout the video. I guess he could be bi. That's fine. But he still is like primarily in love with Bob. Betty's like, oh my God, Judy, stop like slutting it up out here with this gay man. We got to go do our last performance of the night. The hotel, the bar owner, whatever, he shows up and he's like, the sheriff is here to arrest you both. And then Phil's like, what's going on? And they're like, he claims we burned a hole in the rug. And he's like, not that old rug burning bit. I guess that was a thing back then. Is it a thing now? They're like, yeah, and he's trying to hold us up for $200, which is a lot of money by today's standards, let alone in the 50s. Oh my God. She's like, and we snuck our bags out of the room. I was like, you girls leave. You girls get on your train out of here to Vermont because they're going to Vermont to perform for over the holidays. Meanwhile, Phil and Bob have tickets to go to New York. And she says, but why? You might get yourself an awful jam. What's in it for you? And Phil says, 45 minutes all to myself. The comedy is peak, guys. Like, it's elite. It's elite humor. They tell the manager to distract the sheriff and the landlord. He says to Bob, we got to give the girls a little head start. He goes to the girls. He's like, you got to get out tonight. They say our tickets aren't good till tomorrow. So he gives them him and Bob's train tickets and gets them in a cab out of there. Then he says to Bob, I have a plan. Bob says, I have a feeling I'm not going to like it. Phil says, I have a feeling you're going to hate it. Bob says, then what am I doing it for? And Phil says, let's just say we're doing it for a pal in the army. And Bob says, it's not good, but it's a reason. So then what they do is incredible. They come out in drag and lip sync to Sisters, and it's incredible. And the sheriff is chasing them. They gotta hop out the window, catch a taxi. They catch the train. Wouldn't you know it, they don't have tickets. So they buy tickets, but there aren't any tickets left for rooms with beds. So they have to sit up in the club car. The sisters come in. Bob's like pissed off. He's like, Phil, oh my God, why would you do this? I know that you gave the tickets to them. Like, what the fuck? So he's ready to go tell them off, but then they come into the club car. They're looking fire. The costumes in this movie are so good. Then they proceed to be like, oh, we're booked for over the holidays. And Bob says, where? And they say the Pine Tree in Columbia, Vermont. And earlier, Phil had been saying that they should go to Vermont. And Bob's like, oh my God. And he says, Miss Haynes, if you're ever standing under a falling building and someone runs up and offers to save you and carry you to safety, don't stop, don't think, don't hesitate a minute, just spit in his eye. And she says, what does that mean? He says, it means we're going to Vermont. And everyone's like, oh my God, yay. And then they begin to sing the song Snow about how much they really want to wait Christmas and they're going to have one in Vermont and it's going to be the best. And it's really iconic. These girls really met these guys and got them wrapped around their finger. And it's all because of Judy. Put some respect on her name. And the next day they get to Vermont. Yeah, get to Vermont. And it's all green out there because global warming. Another reason this film is topical for the Christmas audiences of today. They get to the Columbia Inn and they're like, we're the Haynes sisters, we're your floor show. And the housekeeper, Ellen, says that they have to cancel because they have like no guests. They can't afford it. And it's so sad. And they're like, oh, and you guys aren't going to stay either, to Bob and Phil. And they're like, well, if the girls are leaving, just then, who comes in the door but General Waverly? The men are shook. They immediately drop everything they're carrying and they salute him. And the general is with his granddaughter, Susan. And she's amazed. Can you imagine, again, like if you showed up just at your family business that's doing bad and like Harry Styles is there and salutes your grandfather? They're like, dude, what are you doing here? Are you a janitor? Which, rude. And he says, as a matter of fact, it's worse than that. I own this hotel. And they're like, a landlord. He insists that the Haynes sisters still stay and perform and that they get paid. And Ellen's kind of like, we don't have the money for that. But so everyone's staying. It's going to be a beautiful, not white Christmas. The men are like, there has to be something we can do to bring business in. Like, oh, if only we could get like a really big act up here. Judy says, you need Wallace and Davis. And they're like, oh, honey, you couldn't get them. They're too big. And then they're like, wait a minute. Wallace and Davis. And he's like, Bob, what do you say? We do our old nightclub routine. We fit the girls in here and there. Fit the girls in here and there. Spoiler alert, the girls are going to go on to have like so many huge fucking roles in this show. And there's no way in hell that all the original leads for the cast just didn't want to come because it was Christmas time, which means that they totally pushed other girls to the side so that Betty and Judy could get bigger roles, which again, iconic of Betty and Judy, but can you imagine? You're in like the chorus, the ensemble of this show, and you're like, oh, okay, so those girls fucked them, definitely. Bob goes and he makes a call and he's like, calls their manager and he's like, get the whole cast up here. We open Christmas Eve. Everyone gets a bonus. Oh my goodness. And Phil's like, wait, that sounds like super expensive. And he's like, it's gonna be. And Phil keeps saying, how much is wow? Because he calls Bob and he's like, hey, what's this gonna set us back? Wow. And then Phil's like, how much is wow? How much is wow? And he goes right in between ouch and boing. And then Phil does the gayest run known to man after him. Ellen comes out and she's like, oh my God, this is the nicest thing. Like the general's gonna love this. And they're like, how did you know? And she says, like any decent self-respecting housekeeper, I listen in on the other line. She kisses Phil. Phil acts way too repulsed by this for a straight man. He goes, he thought of it, points to Bob. She goes, well, it was a lovely thought. Kisses Bob. Bob leans in to kiss her again. And Phil's like, get a hold of yourself. And they run out of there. We cut to everyone is showing up for rehearsals. Keep in mind, they didn't like ask the general. So the general shows up from like getting the mail in town or whatever. And there's just a pack of off-Broadway performers there getting ready to put on this whole show. And he comes up to the men and he's like, what the fuck is this for? So they just say like, oh, business is bad during Christmas time and we figured this was the ideal thing to do. Then we start getting some incredible numbers, but this is the first one we get is the one that's like not the best, and it's the minstrel number. When I was little and I saw this for the first time and subsequent times leading up to my adult life, I didn't know what a minstrel show was. I didn't know what a minstrel was. I had just like assumed it was like any kind of old vaudeville show. I didn't understand the names that they were dropping in it. They say like Georgie Primrose. I didn't know who that was. So I was just like, I love the vibes of this number. It's so fun. And here's the thing, visually, still a stunning number. Now I know what a minstrel show is, obviously. Now I know who Georgie Primrose is because I looked it up. And yeah, they shouldn't do that. The aesthetics are beautiful, and it really does like give like big sparkly glitz glam show business Christmas. And it is like, the song is still catchy to me since I've heard it since I was like 6 years old. But yeah, once I learned what a minstrel number was and what it is they were referencing in that song, and they're like, I'd rather see a minstrel show than any other show I know. And it's like, oh, no. If you're gonna watch it, keep in mind that that is definitely the part of the movie that's like, right, this was made in 1954. Bob and Betty are getting so flirty. The sparks are flying. So then Judy and Phil kind of like set up a like late night meet cute in the main like hall, like the main building of the ski lodge campgrounds. And they get even more flirty. They sing Count Your Blessings, and they kiss. And it's so beautiful, and oh my goodness, and they're in love, and it's so good. It's so charming. And then the general shows up and almost cockblocks the whole thing, and I was like, sorry, I came in here for like a little snack. Betty talks about how she's like, oh, I've always kind of been like a silly schoolgirl, the lady fair on the night on the white horse. And he says it's a little shaky putting knights up on white horses like that. They're likely to slip off. And Betty says, I think mine's here to stay. The next day, Bob is vibing with the general. The general is like, I want to enlist back in the army, because the general still thinks he's like not going to recover financially, even with the show. So he's reapplied, and Bob's excited for him. Bob has the letter. He went to get the mail, shows it to the general. The letter is this condescending piece of shit, basically saying that, oh, what a laugh, what a joke that you think you could be in the service again, you like old guy, taking it easy. And the general is heartbroken. If you're like, did the camera angle change? Yeah, because I had to take the battery pack out to charge it and go have dinner. And I actually got to leave in like an hour to go to the theater. So let's wrap this up. So after the very sad discussion with the general that Bob has, he goes to Phil and he's like, we should bring all the boys from the 151st Division that the general oversaw up here on Christmas Eve to surprise him, to show that he's not forgotten. And Phil says, well, how will we get a whole division up here by Christmas Eve? Bob says, even if we don't get a full division, we can at least get enough guys to show that he's not forgotten. And Phil says, well, how are you going to get in touch with him in time? He says, Ed Sullivan or Ed Harrison, whatever. It's clearly meant to be like, I can't remember if it's the Ed Sullivan or Ed Harris show, because Ed Harris is a veteran of this division. So Ellen, have I been saying Ellen the whole time and it's Emma? Yeah, I have. You know why? Because I saw Nosferatu and the main character's name is Ellen in that, and I just can't stop thinking about it. Anyway, Emma listens in, but she only listens in on a snippet. And that snippet is Ed telling Bob that they should broadcast the whole show, so that he's like, oh, it'll be a lot of free advertising, show the world how you played Santa Claus to the old man, like very much like a feel sorry for him kind of thing, which is not what they want, because they're not doing this to make money. They're doing this to show the general how much they care about him, because this means that like they're not even going to be selling tickets for the Christmas Eve show. Like no one's going to make any money off of this. They're purely doing it as a Christmas gift. But Emma doesn't listen to the whole thing because Susan's coming in. She doesn't want to get caught eavesdropping, so she hangs up. She doesn't hear the part where Bob tells Ed no. So she just assumes that Bob will do this, which I think is an understandable assumption, honestly, because she doesn't know this guy that well. This is a big, famous, really rich guy. He's a celebrity. If you can hear the dogs barking, I'm sorry, but time is of the essence. What is happening down there? So then Betty comes in and Emma's like, here's some mail for you. It's the Carousel Hotel offering you a job whenever you're available. And Betty's like, okay, great. And then Emma tells her the hot goss she just heard. Betty believes this because she remembers what Bob said about how everybody plays angles. So Betty's immediately disgusted with this. And so then she's kind of like whiny and bratty in front of Bob. I can't talk today. So she's kind of just like, no longer flirting with him and kind of like wants to distance herself from him. And he obviously has no clue what's going on because he didn't do anything wrong, but he doesn't know that. And straight people can't communicate. Phil and Judy witness this. Judy thinks that Betty's making space because she always told Judy that until the little chick flew the hen, mother hen flew the coop, mother hen would stay close to the coop, which is, it doesn't make any sense. Chickens don't fly. That's a stupid analogy. Betty's not her mom. They're not even that far apart in age. If my sister ever said something that condescending to me, I would fucking have a fit regardless. Judy's like, if I get engaged real quick, then Betty will feel free to go and just get it on with Bob, I guess. It's a airtight, flawless plan. And Phil is like, well, who would you marry? And she's like, basically like you. And Phil, again, in a totally heterosexual manner, seems repulsed and horrified by this idea. But she's like, but I want to help them. And so Phil agrees reluctantly. Beautiful, true love, the magic of Christmas. So then they're having a cast party. Betty's in a mood, and Bob's sad about it. And they decide, you know, it's absolutely necessary to announce this fake engagement. So they do. Everyone's like, oh my God, yay. Betty is like devastated because she just feels like, wow, like I thought I was falling in love. Judy gave absolutely no sign she was falling in love with this raging homosexual. And so then she's sad. And so then Bob goes to try and like talk it over with Betty, and he's basically like tries to be all breezy, which again, from her perspective, seems like he again doesn't give a singular fuck. She wonders if like he's even viewing her seriously. Judy's like, when they're falling asleep, it's like, okay, you could just like go do whatever it is you want to do now because I'm taken care of. Next day, Bob is at the train station. And he's telling the train master, whatever, the master, I don't know, the guy in charge, to keep all these trains coming in, the passengers off the record, because it's a surprise. I mean, was the general always going in there and checking who's coming in? Was he like, let me see those train logs, those passenger lists, is that allowed? But I think they just need a reason for him to be at the train station, because then he sees Betty getting on a train, and we have this really sad moment where he like runs after the train and she's like, oh, I have a job, which, girl, I get it, like I can be impulsive too. You want to be as far away from this man that gave you the ick as possible, but like professionally, I don't know if that was the move. I guess like whoever the woman is whose role she took was probably like hype as fuck. Bob is devastated and he starts like just aimlessly apologizing without knowing what he's apologizing for. And we know he doesn't actually have anything to apologize for, but he doesn't know that. And he doesn't know what he did wrong. Nothing, but he thinks he did. He's like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I must have sounded like an idiot. I was like thinking about so many other things. Like, I'm so sorry. And the train runs away and he's like holding her hand. And it's really devastating. He left a letter for Judy telling her what's up. Judy is like, oh, we fucked up. So then her and Phil go tell Bob. Bob is pissed, which like, yeah, I might be too, honestly. He's like, oh my God, I'm going to go to New York because I'm going to go make a pitch on the Ed Harris Sullivan, you know, the Ed show to the guys of the 151st Division because this show is hot shit. Everyone tunes in every night. And he says, while I'm there, I'll stop at the Carousel Hotel. I'll tell them this engagement was fake and that she should come back. But in the meantime, you guys have to make sure that the general does not watch the Ed show because everybody watches and this is a big surprise. So Phil's like, oh, I got it. Bob goes and Betty's performing. Wouldn't you know it, she's conveniently performing a song called Love You Didn't Do Right by Me. First of all, I think it's the shittiest song in the show. I don't like it. I think it's stupid. The aesthetics, incredible. Rosemary Clooney looks so good. So then she comes to have drinks with him afterwards and she's like, what a surprise. And again, it's like, girl, if he wanted to, he would. He tells her, you didn't have to run away because the engagement was fake. And she's like, oh my God, why would they do that? And he's like, apparently they thought we were like in love with each other or something. Isn't that crazy? Who would think that? Not you, right? And Betty's like, yeah, who would think that? That's insane. Like, oh my God, you're so in love with each other. Ed shows up and is like, Bob, we gotta go get on the show. And so immediately Betty's brought back down and she thinks, oh my God, he didn't even like come just to see me. He's here to do his pitch to make all this money off of the general's misfortune. So he leaves to go do the show. Betty and the cast are backstage and they're watching the show. Everyone's watching the show. The general back at the inn, he's sitting down with Emma, Susan, Judy, and Phil to watch the show. At this point, Emma and Susan, it's made clear, no, like they're in on the bit. Would have been nice to pass that information along to Betty. They are all working together. So basically they do a bit where they pretend that Phil fell down the stairs and really hurt his ankle. And the general's like, I'll call for a doctor. We'll get you in here to watch TV. They're like, no. And Phil's like, just help me like walk back to the house where I'm staying, the cabin I'm staying in. Help me walk it off. So then we're getting this very funny back-to-back between Phil like goofily trying to get the general like, oh, let's just slow down, walk a little slower. And it's so funny. And then we're getting Bob coming out and he sings a song called What Can You Do with a General? It seems our country never has enjoyed So many 1 and 2 and 3 and 4-star generals unemployed. He explains, if you heard that song and you're from the 151st Division, I have a thing to ask you. And he asked them all to come out to the Columbia and Pine Tree Vermont, Christmas Eve. And he's like, I know it's murder asking you to come out, but think about what we're offering you. And it cuts to Betty hearing the truth about what's going on and not like the misinformation Emma got. And he says, nobody connected with the show is getting anything out of it, just what we're asking you. A chance to give the nicest Christmas present he'll ever get to the nicest guy we'll ever know. Then we cut to it's Christmas Eve, everyone's getting ready, and all the trains are coming in and all the veterans, the men who served in the 151st Division and their families are there. We show the general getting dressed and he's like, why are my suits not here? And Emma's like, I sent them to the cleaners. And he's like, well, what the fuck? Send them one at a time. And Susan says, Grandpa, why don't you wear your uniform? He says, I won't appear in uniform, because he's still sad that they didn't let him re-enlist, you know, so he's feeling like his pride is hurt. He doesn't want to show off that he was a general. And Emma's like, okay, fine, like, don't come to the show then, see if I give a fuck. And he's so annoyed, and he says, Emma, I got along perfectly fine in the army without you. And Emma gives one of the biggest mic drop moments in the show. She says, it took 15,000 men to take my place. Then we go downstairs. Betty has shown up. Betty's back. She's there to be in the show. You know that girl is so pissed that she lost her role again to Betty. Has the mic been recording or not the whole time? I can't. Oh my God, the mic hasn't been plugged in. So if the audio was absolutely shit for the last few minutes, deepest apologies. I had the mic on but not plugged in, and God knows I'm not redoing that whole part because I'm fucking tired and I gotta leave to go to the movie soon. Anyway, plus we're almost done. So they're back and Judy's back and Betty's back and they hug and they're like, okay, we gotta go get in costume. Susan stays behind just as the general is coming out in a suit. They go in and they're like, attention, and all the men stand up and applaud the general, and there's a spotlight on him and you see him tearing up and they're all there. And then the curtains pull back and they've built a set that looks just like their base camp back that we see at the beginning of the film. And Bob comes out in his captain uniform as all the men come out behind him and they sing a reprise of We'll Follow the Old Man, and they march down. And it's beautiful, and like Joe is there waiting by like a cake for the general that says 151st Division, and he comes up on stage to thank them, and in like a dichotomy with the beginning where he doesn't know what to say and is like, oh, how do you help me get off? He just says, I never saw anything look so wonderful in my whole life. Thank you all. And it's really beautiful. Then all the other men go to be with their families, and then the actual like pre-show starts. So then Phil and Bob start singing a song called Gee, I Wish I Was Back in the Army. That's like a comedic song about how it's hard to acclimate to civilian life after being in the army in combat. Then Judy and Betty come out, and Bob didn't know Betty was back, and he looks so surprised. And again, like Bob, within the moments we see in the movie, never finds out why Betty left or why she was mad, and he doesn't even like give a fuck. He just loves her so much, which again, get you a person who would. Sing the song, and it's really cute, and then they leave to go change into their costumes for the rest of the show. And they see something happening. It's snowing. The general, Joe, comes up to him and is like, General, there's something you gotta see outside. And the general goes outside and sees that it's snowing for the first time in over a month, which means that not only is like having this show here for the rest of the Christmas break going to bring in business, but then for the rest of the winter, they're gonna have business because there's snow, and it's like the Christmas magic of their love for him brought the snow. Then it's time for the final title number where everyone's dressed in like Santa themed attire. And Bob is like dressed as Santa. He has like a fake toy sack, and we see Betty put something in the toy sack that's like a present addressed to him. They come out, these children come out and do like a little ballet number. It's very clear they're the producer's kids because they fucking suck and they look like they're being held at gunpoint to do this, but whatever. And then the Haynes sisters, Bob and Wallace, come out. They sing White Christmas. It's beautiful. Then during like an interlude in the song where like the children choir take over singing, Bob notices there's an actual present in the prop toy sack from Betty, goes behind the tree in the middle of the number because it's his show, he can do what he wants, goes behind the tree, opens it, it's a figurine of a knight on a white horse, and then Betty walks behind the tree and he holds it up and she nods. He throws it just drops it into the tree and kisses her. And then Phil and Judy come behind the tree again. Everyone's just having a little meeting behind the tree in the middle of opening night of this show. He's like, hey, Wallace and Davis are flat, we gotta take the show on the road and get some loot, which is like weird because I thought they already planned to take the show on the road because they had said the cast was getting off for Christmas, but that implied that they were coming back. So but whatever. And he's like, I can't join you. I'm going to be very busy. And Bob kisses Betty and Phil says, wait a minute, I'll join you, and kisses Judy. So the hetero couple are really in love and they finally have shown their feelings and it's beautiful. And the queer couple are going to have their lavender marriage because I think Judy's queer too, and that's really beautiful too. Then when they're done making out behind the tree, they come back around and they do this to signal to the stagehands to like raise the set dropping behind them, the backdrop, because they have opened the barn doors to show everyone that it's actually snowing here. And everyone cheers and they're like, Merry Christmas. And they start singing the final chorus of White Christmas and they gesture for the audience to sing along with them. And the camera pans out over the audience. We see Susan kiss her grandfather on the cheek and everyone's so happy. And the title comes across the end, White Christmas. I think in the year 2024, a topical film, global warming, the mistreatment of veterans, women wanting to make a name for themselves in a male-dominated industry without the help of men, shows like how the world kind of tried to like regress to family values, traditional family values after the war. And this is like a group of young people who don't adhere to those values and therefore like they're kind of worried about how that's going to have them perceived. And then in finding each other, they find acceptance and love. Like none of them ever expect the other ones to change. I also always appreciate a Christmas movie that doesn't really have anything to do with like Jesus or Santa. Kind of finds like a way to talk about just the family connection and the friendship connection and just like connection as humans for Christmas. I think that's really beautiful. And I think it's funny. Like, I didn't even say all the jokes in this video. The jokes are hilarious. I think it's on Netflix. You should go watch it. I'm about to go watch it in theaters. I think it's an incredible film. If you ever meet anyone who tries to compare it to Holiday Inn, spit in their eye. I have a book out, I think by this point in time that the video is up, called The Firefighter Before Christmas. It's a cute little romance novella set at Christmas in the fictional town of Huey, Maryland. It's perfect for fans of Charmed and 911, about a witch falling in love with a hot firefighter. It features Italian folklore, rheumatoid arthritis representation, lots of fun, whimsical Christmas times. And it's pretty good. I recommend it personally. Make sure you subscribe to me on here. Follow me on Instagram. I also downloaded like Lemonade and Blue Sky, and God knows I have a Tumblr, like just everything, because my main following and source of like any kind of brand deals or income comes from TikTok. And since the fate of that remains unknown, let's diversify. And obviously I've been here with you folks for about 10 years now. A lot of the original content has been privated because it was very cringy. I don't know what college Molly was doing, but I've got it together now. Kind of. I hope you have a very merry holidays. I hope you just feel the joy of the season, regardless of what you're celebrating. If you're not celebrating anything, I hope you have a magical rest of your week, and I'll see you soon with a new video. Goodbye! May your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white. My dear partner, when what's left of you gets around to what's left to be gotten will be worth getting whatever it is you got left. When I figure out what that means, I'll come up with a crushing reply.